out of curiosity, have used Claude before? Feel free to just raise your hand. No? Okay. And so I would assume everybody else has used ChatGPT, right? To an extent, because that one seems to be the one with the most popularity. Okay, cool. All right, so let me, and I've got multiple screens going, so give me a second to familiarize myself with my own landscape. And I'm going to share the screen and hopefully not get into a big echo chamber as I do it. All right, so they don't look like much now, but here we go. All right, here goes nothing, guys. This is unrehearsed. So we'll just go roll through it. All right, so this one is about contrasting ChatGPT with Claude. All right, and in this specific circumstance, I'm really talking about GPT-4 versus Claude 2. All right, because everything I do is on GPT-4. Rarely do I use 3.5. All right, so if you have to bail early and you don't already know how to access the replays, you just go to that URL down there, bazooka.com/roundtable-replays, and then you'll get access to the community and you'll have access to all the replays. And some of the prompts that we use, if you want access to that, you can just go to bazooka.com/prompts. You'll get access to a free library of prompts. Anyway, so just wanted you to know that. Now, does anybody have any questions before we get started? Okay, so let's rock. So there are plenty of differences between the two. ChatGPT, I'll tell you, has way more functionality, but there are really specific nuances in Claude that's going to make you say, this is when I need to use Claude, and this is when I need to use ChatGPT. So what I first want to talk about is all the extensibility that's built into ChatGPT. If you've hit that little menu at the top, you'll see they now have the ability to browse with Bing. They have advanced data analysis, which used to be called code interpreter. They've got the plugin store, which is amazing. And now they've integrated DALL-E 3 to where you could literally just type into the chat window an image you want to create, and it will sometimes create the image. This morning, it was freaking out. So they're still working it on. I'm sure there's probably so much computing power that we can't imagine that it just clogs up when everybody's trying to, create images. All right. The other thing that ChatGPT does is it allows you to put custom instructions in the background that influence the output. And you've probably seen me go through some of my stylistic prompts, but when I want it to write like I want it to write, I put in custom instructions in there. When I want it to quit saying goofy stuff, I have that in my custom instructions. All right. Now, here's the thing that you really have to understand as you're working with things like ChatGPT or any other AI tool, or if you're working with something which I would call kind of a middle ground, where maybe it's something like a Jasper or a Copy AI or something like that, where you literally fill in some blanks and let it roll. All right. You have to understand that you create a prompt and you're asking the AI tool to generate an output. And that AI tool is going to have a set of its own knowledge, and then it's going to have what I call guardrails. All right. And so sometimes the guardrails have to do with its own prompt as it talks to the big database itself. And sometimes those guardrails are just how they want to restrict what that output will do. Like, for instance, they don't want to give legal advice. They don't want to give medical advice. They don't want to influence or there's always going to be some level of bias, but they're trying to control the bias. So anyway, there's a lot of guardrails they're going to put in before you even get your ideal output. So you have an ideal output in mind, but just know that's kind of the chain of events. Now, if you are familiar with the plugin store, you know that you could add features into ChatGPT. And the way those work is those plugins communicate back with ChatGPT through an API, and then they have their own set of prompts that dictate the output. So they've got their own prompts and their own guardrails that are going to further influence the output. Now, with a plugin like this one, this is WebPilot. WebPilot just searches the web for URLs and brings them back and spits it out. Though they don't have as many what I would call guardrails as some of the other ones. But when you enter into, let's say, a plugin that analyzes a PDF, those have significant guardrails and significant prompt engineering through their own API that are going to really influence the output. All right, and I'm going to get to an example of that in a second. But what that means is you now have to have your own prompt refiner, which you've seen us go through in previous episodes, and those refining prompts will hopefully get a better output for you. So just be aware of that if you're working with a plugin, you're going to have its own influence. And I was using one earlier this morning and last night, and man, it literally said I had custom instructions running and it just ignored them and wrote its own way. So then I had to go and refine it. So anybody have any questions on that so far? And feel free to speak up. Okay. All right. Now.
Hey, John, Angela just asked a question I think you would like to answer for her. Spend the $20.
Angela, new person here. Oh, sorry, Angela. What are the advantages of paying for GPT? Man, yeah, you get all the extra functions with GPT. Now, look, Angela, I don't know. Are you able to unmute and chat it through, or no? Whether you pay for it or not, I don't know that the privacy issue is a
that's kind of uniform,
right? Yeah, it's going to be uniform.
It's mostly about you get 4.0 plus you get escalated access. In other words, anybody who's on free, you get privilege to get to the engine from a priority standpoint before people that are free. So it gives you some ability to get to if it's being overused and not accessible by most people, if you pay, you'd be able to get in. That's a big piece of it.
Yeah, big deal. But I mean, for anybody, you just have to be careful of what you put up, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But at the end of the day, anything you put into the machine, you want to make sure that it's not going to be your corporate financials or anything like that. But that's a whole different discussion. But I actually pay for both. I pay for ChatGPT and I pay for Claude. They're both $20 a month. I haven't really at this point seen the benefit of paying for Claude. It was always pretty fast. But anyway, I like them both, and I use them both for different things. All right, so let's take a look behind the shoot. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is the point that I wanted to make. So you have to understand that when you're in the prompt window here, each one of these has a limit. Okay, so in this particular case, I'm moving my mouse and screwing things up. ChatGPT has a limit of 1,500 to 2,000 words. Claude, not so much. Claude's got a much bigger capacity. All right, so that's what's called a single input limit, and it has to do with tokens, but I'm just translating tokens into words. All right, and this is going to be interesting because with Claude, you have a much bigger, what I would call a context window, okay, which means when you're putting your inputs in there and you're asking questions, and you know how it just continues to scroll up, right? You have more and more context as you continue to build. Well, Claude can continue to reference all of its previous conversations with you in that one context window, not if you have a separate one, okay? So if you're trying to write a book, for instance, you could literally do that in one session inside of Claude, all right? Because Claude could literally, it can hold, I think it's 100,000 tokens versus 8,000 tokens in ChatGPT. So what that means is you could literally take George Orwell's book, 1984, upload it into Claude, and it would consume the entire thing. Now, you wouldn't have much left to ask questions because all of that is the entire context window, if you will. However, you could upload the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and you'd have plenty of room to ask it questions and to generate your own cliff notes to do a whole lot of stuff. All right. So that's what does that make sense? That's what a context window is about. It's essentially all the stuff that the AI will continue to remember and call back and hold in the conversation. Massive amount inside of Claude. Move it over there to ChatGPT, and that's the extent of the context window. Literally, that's drawn to scale. All right. So whereas you could upload 1984 and have very little room left to ask questions, in ChatGPT, you could upload a copy of Goodnight Moon and you won't have any room to ask questions. All right. So that's the difference between the two. Massive difference. All right. Now, in terms of comparisons, now this is just kind of a fast look at it, and we'll go through some exercises and some examples. And if you have any, feel free to throw them my way. But for context, capacity, Claude wins. For speed, Claude wins. It's way faster. Copywriting quality, I think it's really good right out of the gates. ChatGPT has a tendency to use phrases over and over again, like, I hope this email finds you well, delve into this if you're keen on that. If you've used it to any length, you know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of those little things that it's constantly using. If you're writing direct response copy, you have to influence it quite a bit, but out of the gates, Claude does a much better job than ChatGPT. On the other end, extensibility, like we've already walked through, GPT wins hands down on that. Creating graphics, it's got that capability. Analyzing images, which is a new one that just launched, pretty good at that. That's kind of a cool feature that I'll walk you through. Data analysis, on the other hand, just because of the sheer volume that Claude can consume, I had to put the check mark over there. It does a better job, at least for the use cases that I've played around with in the marketing world. Okay. So that's my fast look on the comparison side. Does anybody else have any other thoughts on that? Anybody else worked with it at all at any length? Okay. So now let's go through some test drives. I've got Claude over here in one window. I've got ChatGPT sessions over here. And then I've got this database. I just wanted you to see. So this is 768 different traffic products. You can kind of see the data that we've got here. They got signs. All right. These things here, I just wanted you to kind of see. This is going to be interesting, right? Because this doesn't say it's a sign, but the MUTCD, I forgot what that stands for, but it's basically a traffic, whatever. It's the governing body for traffic safety. So they dictate these sign numbers. So an S4 is going to be these variations. I can go on to some of the other ones that are in here. Like, look, the W27 is going to be a left, right, offside road. You've got yield ahead symbols, which are W3. So you could literally go into these things. Let's just for giggles, I'm going to take this W3 and this will show you the context or the training, I guess you would call it, for each AI. So let's just say, what is okay. And I'm not going to give it any other context besides that. And then I'm going to go up here and I'm just going to use the default. All right. So I'm not using a plugin. I'm not using anything. And I'm just going to see what it knows. And while we're waiting, here we go. A warning sign. Okay. So see, it got it. If I go over here, I paste it over here. Well, there you go. Not close. Not close.
like it.
True, but not the context you really
not what I was looking for. All right. So
That's
now, if we were
classic.
to do it, it is classic. But that's what I mean. It's just so strange. Okay,
Yeah,
so let's
yeah.
take. All right, here we go. A W4.
By the way, I would dare say that what Claude came up with is probably what the majority of the human beings in the United States would know, right? I mean, if you look at it from that angle, they probably know more about Star Wars than they do about the actual war.
Yeah,
So,
right. Okay, so this got the slippery when wet. Let's see if Claude can grip this, or if it's going to go back into its. I should have probably gone to a new. Yeah, see, it's still thinking it's in
it's
Star
still in that
Wars.
context. Yeah, you have to clear the context.
So we're going to kill this before it grows. All right, and we'll start all over and see if it does it right. Lord, man, I'm picking the wrong stuff. A W4 is, but there is no such thing in my world of a W4.5. Claude model version not found. I've never seen that one before. That's a new one. And here we go. We have a network error over here. All right, but it's interesting that these things have different data sets in terms of what they're giving back. And then last but not least, we could try one more. Let's just go over here. And there's a reason that I'm doing this, by the way. So I just wanted everybody to kind of see what kind of knowledge these things are schooled on and where it can get tripped up. Look at this. Wow. So you would have to, with Claude, you're going to have to say, what's, I'll show you.
What's
you
the
have
context?
to actually, yeah, you're going to have to say, you're going to have to give it one more clue.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Yeah, so now it's getting closer. This is a Canadian standard. We're still talking about US, so I would probably have to refine it even more. Okay. Now, where it gets interesting is if I were to take this entire data set, now I'm giving the AI more context, but what I want to know is how does it consume the context and what's it going to do with that when I start interrogating it with more what I would call marketing centered questions. All right. So I'm going to take this data set. So give me a second here, because I've actually got it as a CSV file, just so you know there's nothing up my sleeve. This is the CSV file that we're looking at. Okay. And so let's go to a new window in GPT. And we'll use the data analysis so that we can actually upload that. And the cool thing about GPT is that we can actually drag and drop and pop it in there. And then I'm just going to paste this. Whoops, not that one. Hang on, let's go back over here. And because I've actually had to do this, by the way, what I wanted to do is I wanted to say, look, tell me, and I might trim this down to 20. I want to know out of that entire list, if I were targeting fast food restaurants to sell this safety equipment to, what would be the most likely products out of that list of 780 that they would buy? Okay. And so if you think about it, what I'm trying to do here is, like, if I were consulting for a company that was in a traffic safety space and they've got all these products and I want to attract a new vertical with a new set, I might want to bundle some stuff up. Might want to go to a franchisor like a Chick-fil-A or something like that and say, hey, I got all these custom signs just for you. We'll brand them, blah, blah, blah. So I'm trying to get the AI to tell me what's the best way without me having to go through 784 things and figure out what is likely. I want to see if the AI will do it. Does that make sense, guys?
Yep.
Okay, so let's see. We'll do it over here. And while this is running, just so you can see the speed difference, we'll go back over here And this time I can't drag and drop it. So I'm just going to go, I think this is where I have them hit it. There it is. I'm going to upload it, paste the same prompt, rock and roll. And while it's thinking, I'll go back over here. You can see this is doing all kinds of stuff. See, we got an encoding issue. It's going to try to open it again. Okay, now it's opened it correctly. And it's giving me some interesting stuff. I go over here. This one's already cranking. No encoding error issues, no nothing. And let's see how well it did. Parking signs, sure. Customer parking only. Speed bump, maybe. No parking, slippery when wet, sure. So it picked out some interesting things over here. Barriers, low clearance sign, probably for a drive-through for sure. It picked out the same parking ones. This is interesting. I don't know why it picked these.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me. But if I were looking at them, I would say this one probably did a better job of sifting through the data, understand what I was trying to tell it. Now, I gave it minimal stuff in the prompt, right? If I were giving it more detail about a fast food restaurant, then it might have an even better chance of getting the right stuff. And instead of me actually having to think through it, my first prompt typically would have been, give me an idea of what kind of safety equipment and signage a fast food restaurant might need in the restaurant. And then it would be thinking that way, right? And then it would have that as context, and then I could plug it in. And I wouldn't have to really get refining on the prompt because that conversation ahead of it gave it more context. Am I making sense?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So now I want to show you some other interesting things because I've used this so many times, the data analysis, and I've been really impressed with how much data this thing can consume. And I've been really depressed with how this thing chokes. All right. Now, let's look at a couple of new things. Okay, so here we are. We're in advanced data analysis, and you can upload stuff, right? I can do all these things. I want to show you this. Now, it's telling me that I could upload any of these things, a CSV file, a document, PDF, etc. This PDF is 23 megs. All right. I can tell you right now, without wasting your time, it'll choke. If I tried to do the same thing over here, this says there's a 10 megabyte limit. All right. So it would not take this. But I want you to check this out. Okay. Because it can consume an image. Now, this is interesting. Let me see if I can get it so y'all can see what this is. Okay. So I got an Apple Watch, and it's got that little ability to take an EKG. All right. So this is actually me. So there's no HIPAA worries out there. I'm letting you know this is me. All right. So I had, some fluttering going on with my heart, and they've been telling me that I have AFib. And I'm like, no, I don't, because I've been on a 30-day monitor. They never did. But every now and then my heart does some weird stuff. Right. And so I was feeling it doing that weird stuff. So I quickly took an EKG, and you can see from this, there's some weirdness, right? Weirdness up here, but then levels out. And that's usually what happens. Okay. And the doctor told me, dude, you're probably doing too much caffeine or you're under too much stress. I'm like, check. Yeah, that's for sure. Okay. But let's see what this thing will do with this. And the first thing I want to ask it, I'm going to just go over here in my prompt library, and I will steal this. And I'm just going to paste it in here just to see, does it know? Okay, come on. My mouse is freaking. I just say, what do you make of this? Looks like an EKG. Correctamundo. All right. Now, while it's thinking, I'm going to take this prompt. Yeah, here we go. Now, there's going to be a difference between using this particular avenue and uploading it as an image. So I want you to watch this. So here's my refining prompt. This ECG is a singular one, right? So it's not three different ones. I want them to know it's a singular one. And as you note, it's taken from an Apple Watch. Actually, it didn't note that, but in this fine print tells you it does. And here I'm trying to get it off track by saying, I'm not asking you to provide medical advice because it'll freak out. I'm just saying, hey, I want you to act as a cardiologist. This is used to train students. I want you to interpret the top line. Tell me how it differs from the lower ones, noting that it was a continual ECG. In other words, there was a change over the 30-second interval. What happened in the first versus the second 20? Okay, with me? Mm-hmm. All right, so now it's going to analyze it. See what it do. While I'm doing that, I'm going to go over here, and then I'm just going to go to the default, because the default allows you to upload an image, and we will upload that same image. And then we'll go through the same initial prompt. Let's see if it does it like it did this morning. Because this morning, this one, see what it's saying here. It's important to note. I can comment on the pattern, obviously changes, however, blah, 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 typically, but based on images. I could attempt further insights. Yeah, see here it's asking me to tell it what to do with this. When I ran this morning through the advanced data analysis, it just said, no, man, I'm not a doctor. I can't do this. I can't do this. So, phooey, let's try this again. While it's trying it again, I'm going to go ahead and tee up the refining prompt. Yeah, see, this one is noting the fine print. And it's pulling it all out of an image, y'all, which is really kind of cool. Now, it's got a lot of uses, but I'm trying to just kind of use it as a business use. And now if I were to paste this in here, now I've actually taken a picture of the bottom of a shop vac, and it came back and I said, what is this? And it says, looks like it's a shop vac. If you turn it around and show me the model number, I could tell you where to get parts. I'm like, what? I thought that was pretty cool. All right.
Yeah, John, okay, I'm doing an event tomorrow night for the launch weekend at the OM. And so I was building this Shark Tank deck, and I was playing with this image feature just to goof off. So I dropped an image of two guys standing up there pitching their idea. And I says, what is this a picture of? And it says, well, this looks like two individuals who are in a pitch competition. It implies that there is a panel of judges that are not in the exact scene. I mean, it was telling me exactly what that image was.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's really interesting. All right. So here we go. So it's given me some interesting feedback, way more than the data analysis did, which is really kind of fascinating that there's a difference. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying before. There's guardrails, right? So this is clearly a divergent path inside of the AI than this one. So this one has more room to play. And then if I were to take yet another prompt and throw it into both of these, where I say, okay, I want you to tell the students, what's the deal with these things? All right. And I'm even saying fancy stuff like the patient presents with no history of heart disease, prior heart attacks, blah, blah, blah. And now it's pulling basically from its general knowledge base, right? And same over here. Now, in this one, all right, you can see I have custom instructions on. That's what this I is. And if I were to go scroll down, you can see I've kind of tempered what it would do, but this is a different set of custom instructions versus the one that I have over here. This one's slightly different. but I'm toning it down. I'm telling it how to write. So it's kind of easier to understand. All right. And again, it's going back to the regular knowledge base. But I thought that was really interesting that it could pull all that from an EKG snapshot. So clearly these things are pretty smart and they're pretty intelligent when it comes to just analyzing a photo. And like you said, Bob, if it
No,
can
I'm
make
good.
that kind of an inference, that's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
I'm
John,
just
one more.
gonna have something later.
One more thing, that the image thing. I watched this little webinar. This guy who's a nerd, who's a old school programmer, but he was doing some programming, and his program wasn't working right, and he kept asking ChatGPT, "Hey, here's my code. What's wrong with it?" And it was narrowing. It was giving him some ideas where to look, but not really in solutions.
Mm-hmm.
But since this new image processing happened, he would take a screen snapshot of what was happening on the screen and put his code and the screenshot in there and say, "Hey, here's the code and here's what it looks like on the screen." And it narrowed it down, and he found exactly what was wrong with the code. It basically iterated each time he did a fix. He would run it again and fix the little things one by one. And he finally got the piece of code running, and he said, "I would have never been able to figure out how to get this running." But the implication there is that this engine could iterate itself, right? So if it was writing its own software and was running its own software and capturing the output and analyzing both, that it could eventually revise its own code to the point where it actually worked. So that was kind of an interesting side impact.
Yeah, I've had it. The other day, I had an error message that flew out from a website that was managed by somebody else. And I just copied the code from the error message that, broke out, pasted it in there. I said, "What's this?" And it explained it to me. And I was like, wow, that's pretty slick, because it was all gibberish code to me, but it was way cool. All right, so now let's take another thing here. Let me just play around with a PDF. Okay, so if I were to just drag in a PDF and tell it to summarize it, I want you to take a look at how this works. So let me see. Yeah, I'm going to take a complicated one and we'll see how this works. Okay, so in this particular case, I've got the advanced data analysis on, and in this one, I've got a PDF reader. All right. Now, just to make this a fair fight, I may just do this all in the same window, so I have custom instructions running that are identical. All right, so I'm going to just show you what the custom instructions look like. And you can see that I'm telling it to quit saying goofy stuff, right? And then I'm giving it parameters around how I want it to sound. So you can kind of see how I was communicating a minute ago. All right, so now if I paste this in, it's going to try to track that PDF down, and then I'm going to have it review it. And then I've got some thoughts over here about it. And I want to see just how well, let's see that. I'm going to take out this part that describes what's in the PDF and incorporates my thoughts on it. And I'm going to copy that same thing. All right, so we're going to let it rip. Now, to do that over here, I actually have to upload said PDF, which happens to be right here. So I'm going to upload that PDF. I'm going to paste that. I'm going to get rid of this. All right. And it'll automatically know that I've uploaded a PDF. And then while that's running, I'm going to run back over here, and you can see, look how much writing this has done. And then of course it's pitching the plugin over here. All right. Now on the other end, if I were to use this same thing, and you just, every time you run this, it's going to run a little different. But if I were to do this and then just go into advanced data analysis, and so now it's going to take that PDF, and I'll take the same prompt. Delete that since we know it's there. And you'll see a difference in the writing style. Okay, so it's got to now say, yeah, I got to go upload it. If we go over here, straight out, this did a pretty decent job. So it's got it all written up. Now, let's see if the right sequence, blah, blah, blah. Excited to see more. Okay, so it did comment on, you can find the link to the paper in the comments, which is what I asked it to do. So it did follow instructions. If we go back over here. Okay, so now here it's actually going to add the link. That's kind of a hoot. You can say yes. By the way, you don't have to say yes or continue. You can just hit Y. It knows. All right, so there we go. So look at the difference in how this writes. Ever wondered if the order in which you feed concepts into an AI affects its output? Turns out it does a lot. Contrast that with this one, where we use the actual plugin that, again, put its own guardrails around here. And it says, in the realm of AI and natural language processing, the sequence in which concepts are presented to the model is pivotal. Okay, so clearly this plugin overrode everything. And so I would have to write a refiner prompt to go back and clean it up. So you see why I was telling you earlier, you have to be really cognizant of all the different layers that are going to be attacking your input and influencing your output. All right. So let's see. Yeah, I think, yeah, those are the main things. So when I go back, I don't know whether any of y'all have any other use cases that you've played around with or you'd like to see, but I'm a big fan of Claude, and I can tell you when I use it. For those of you who haven't used it, tell me what you're thinking. How do you use it? Because it holds a lot more data. Sandy, I know you've played around with both, right?
Yeah, I mean, Claude for me is much slower. That's my main.
Claude is slower for you.
Much slower.
Really?
Yeah, and
Oh, so what do you put in there?
I don't pay for either one right now, but for me it's slower. So I took down a note that you said it was faster, so I want to try to figure out why that would be.
Yeah, I'd love to know, because you might be putting in something that I'm not putting in there. Are you uploading a lot of data to it or whatever?
Yeah, I
Because
upload a lot
every
of
time
data.
I've used it.
Yeah.
Okay, so give me an idea what kind of data are you putting in it?
Mostly like customer feedback to analyze patterns and trends, like from our customer support team. So trying to identify, what are the top 3 new features requested and all the data that we have. Claude is probably 2 to 3 times longer. The answers are better, so I'm willing to wait for it, but it's just a lot slower. So I'm wondering if I paid for it, if it would be better.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. And I also don't know what the data structure looks like, because that could be an issue with it as well. But every test that I've run, Claude is faster and it seems to give better output. But the other thing I'll tell you, Claude seems to do math better, which is kind of interesting. I ran a test earlier, and let me see if I can find it. Oh yeah, here we go. I upload the database, and I said, analyze the list and tell me how many of them are signs. And it said 376 out of the 588 are signs. Okay, interesting, because there are more than 588 products on the list. So maybe it scratched a few off. I don't know. And then when I did the exact same thing over here, I don't know where it was, but I probably won't be able to find it. But ChatGPT told me that there were 36 signs. So, I'm struggling when it comes to analyzing CSV files, I'm really I am more inclined to run a pivot table in an Excel spreadsheet and trust it more than I trust the AIs. So it'll give you a head start in certain things. Like I was saying earlier, when I was just saying, hey, tell me which one of these would apply to a restaurant. It nailed that part of it. So I'm not sure what kind of analytics or how deep is your customer feedback database? Is it just a list of comments, or I don't know, how's it structured?
Yeah, it's just a whole set of, comments that come in through a customer support conversation.
Oh, okay. So
But
it's
it is a
unstructured.
lot. It is a lot, yeah. So
Okay.
but otherwise I do like Claude better. I also like the concept of the use of constitutional AI with Claude better than ChatGPT, with the bounds and the ethics around it too, which is why they're, the two lead OpenAI guys left ChatGPT and went to form this company, was because of the ethics concerns they had with chat. So I like the whole philosophy better as well.
Yeah, I was just reading about that yesterday as well, and I thought that was kind of interesting. The thing that I'm always wary of is, if you remember in the early days of Google, their mantra was do no evil. And I'm not sure that they still have that as a mantra. So, when somebody says they have some sort of ethics and boundaries, when you start pulling in billions of dollars, I wonder how those will relax in the face of competition. I mean, just wondering. But I agree with you. I like it. Were there any particular aspects, Andy, that resonated with you most?
Well, I just like that they leverage and use boundaries on what they're doing, what they're pulling in. Daria, who is there's a brother and sister team who run the company, who created the company. She came and spoke, and she was just talking about, why they left OpenAI and the new boundaries they put, what they pull from, what data they won't pull from, like copyrighted data. They won't pull from certain things. So she was just talking through how they've really created they start with a set of values, and that's into the AI, and then everything they do in Claude then tests against those values. Whereas ChatGPT doesn't have a value statement, so it pulls from wherever, is what I understand.
Yeah. I don't know. That's one of those things where I'd have to dig in deeper. But I'm definitely impressed with Claude, and the fact that the founders left under circumstances that they were concerned about with ChatGPT. So that impresses me. Bill Smith, I don't know whether you can unmute, but I know you've used both pretty cleverly with what you're doing. Do you have any feedback?
I think I concur with you, John, with regards to the data capacity is a huge one for us, and we ran into that with Claude right off the bat, and we're still experimenting some of the things on the like Excel spreadsheet type stuff, and looking at data, and the summarization is a lot easier with the Claude, because of the amount of data you can put into it. And the key thing that we've been trying to play with both is really trying to get the style guide of the summarization that we have. And sometimes we find that if it's short enough, we can get a really good summarization in the style that we want out of GPT more than the Claude. But that's just I think that's because we're using more of the add-in type stuff.
Yeah. So I don't know. I know that you have you're using it for some interesting documentation that you're putting together, right? And this is where I think prompting comes into play significantly, because if you don't tell it really specifically what to do in the right sequence, then it has way bigger room for error, Are you experiencing that, Bill?
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, it's night and day unless you have the right prompts and yeah, I mean, and being much more explicit and kind of really trying to nail it and bring it back to out to ground zero when it starts going off the ranch.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny, I don't know whether you've experienced it, but it sounds like Sandy has already. The things that used to take us days and weeks, now we can get done in, hours or minutes. And in just the short amount of time we've been playing with AI, for us, it's been like 2.5 years, but, if you're playing around with ChatGPT or Claude, it's been, significantly less than that. So now all of a sudden, you're starting to get impatient on seconds,
We
right?
had one
takes...
interesting application that I just tried earlier this week that came up with some interesting stuff. We have a lot of emails for clients that are on one of this products that we offer, present and past emails from people who are no longer subscribing clients. And it's about maybe 600 emails or whatever. And the main thing we wanted to do is we just threw it in there and realizing a lot of these are corporate emails and whatever. And so like if it says GS, they'll know it's from Goldman Sachs and whatever. And so we threw them all in and just said, can you please tell me, here's all the 600 emails. Give me, and chat doesn't know it's from us or whatever. An email is an email. I'm not putting proprietary stuff in. It's not saying it's a client or not a client. But it came up really pretty interestingly with not only name of the company, a lot of the ones, Gmail, obviously, there's no way they can get with the Gmail. But then I just said, and then rank them by industry sector. And then underneath that, what is the primary use case? And so it came in, had all the sector stuff. Sectors are too big. And so I said, can you get it for use case? And it was interesting to us that we know a lot of people in the financial services area use this, but what we didn't know is that one of the number one customers when we pile it down a little bit more is investment bankers. And so it makes sense that they would be using our product. But now that's going to change a lot with regards to our dialogue, our discussion, our marketing as to how we're going to try to pull them out first, investment bankers, and also of course money managers that are using our financial data that we come out with. And so but it was interesting. I didn't know that would be able to take an email and be able to really dissect the stuff and get it all the way down to like figure out someone's in investment banking at Goldman Sachs.
Wow, that's really interesting. So you did that on Claude or on ChatGPT?
That was Chat.
Okay, that's interesting. That's a really cool use case, right?
Yeah, I didn't know that you could dig under the covers like that.
Do you guys think that they could do that with a website? If I give it a website and say pull down all these companies from the website, would that work?
I think so.
How do you mean you mean pull down the contacts or what?
So it's a newsletter website with newsletters, and it has like advertisers, right? Inside the newsletter. So I'm like, okay, pull down all the companies that are advertisers, right, in the newsletter. You think it would work?
I'm sure it probably would.
Oh yeah, that should work.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, I told John about another use case I had about a month or so ago, and that was looking at search firms that were applying. One of the things besides I do in the financial, which is my day job, my non-day job is I'm chairman of the board of USA Water Polo, the Olympic governing body for the sport in the United States, and we're in the process of interviewing to try to find a new CEO. The existing one is retiring after 16 years. So anyway, we had a lot of different search firms like Russell Reynolds, whatever. And they all kind of came in. And what we did is I took the PDFs of every one of the pitches that they had. Each one was around 50 pages long, so like it's like who has relative experience, whatever, but just took each one in. And then before I did that, I first said, I'm going to be evaluating for a position, in the sports area, looking at at these various search firms, what are the criteria that I should use to evaluate each one? And it had like 12 different things that's evaluate. I said, so now on each one, is there an upper limit and a lower limit? If like, so for instance, they say they have a lot of Olympic sport clients or something like that, then they'd give it a 10 versus a 2 or something. And this is only looking at citations that are in the documents that they gave us. So it's not, independent for sure. But it came out, and it did a great job of ranking all the search firms. We had 6 search firms, and one got on the screen because of that. We didn't select them, but I thought it was interesting that you could take it, have it analyze it. You ask the chat or the AI to like, what is the criteria I should use to look at this? It tells you the criteria, and then you put a plus and a minus or whatever, try to figure out some scale for each of those criteria. And then it was, I thought it did a really great job of it. John, I know I showed you that before.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. It's fun when you can take information like that, and instead of hiring an intern or a researcher to spend forever to try to figure that out, where you've got enough data and just say, let's see if it'll work, and you ask it enough questions. It's really fascinating to me how fast it can come up with stuff, right? And the key obviously is to just be curious and then to continue to refine what you're asking. Bill, I don't know whether you've done it, but once you go through that process, do you refine those prompts? I mean, this is what we do. We go through a process and we continuously refine them, and then we create a prompt that will start the process all over again, so we don't have all the refining steps. And that way somebody can follow us right after that, do it again in seconds rather than the hour it might have taken it to get the first level of output. Do y'all do that?
We absolutely do it, but it's not in this case, because our next step was we interviewed everyone and then we hired someone. So it was really an ad hoc exercise. So I did it, used it, got it in and out, but certainly for any of the stuff that we're using internally, we're all about kind of like the way you do, John, about having approved prompts or whatever and getting people involved. And what we're finding though is that we're getting prompt drift, on some of these, the things that work, like a month ago aren't really working as well. And I said, well, that's to be expected, not only because the platforms are changing, but we're platform agnostic. And so we want to be able to move between Claude and ChatGPT. And so we expect that. And we're, and the reason I say that to the staff, because people are going to get frustrated, like this stuff doesn't work because you're not doing that. But I think everyone, at least internally here, we know that all this stuff is a work in process and it's not really there yet.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, I have an interesting request for you guys. We do this every other week, and we do it at 10:30 Central. We have a guy who used to be in New York who's now moved to Thailand. Glenn McNeil is his name. Used to be kind of a regular here, moved to Thailand. That's 12 hours off from us. And he was like, oh man, I miss coming to the roundtables. And I was like, okay, if we moved it next week's, or not the next one, but the following session up to 9:30 and call it Glenn McNeil Day, let me see if everybody is down for that. So would y'all be open if a week from this coming Friday, the next upcoming deal, we do it at 9:30 instead of 10:30, just for Glenn?
That would work.
Everybody say aye. Why not? Okay. Yeah. Okay. 9:30 works for everybody. Yeah. So if you know Glenn, yeah, he's a good guy. So that'd be fun. So I will tell Glenn that in honor of him, in 2 weeks, we'll meet at 9:30. Hopefully everybody will remember that, but we'll send out the email reminders and it'll be cool. But good stuff.
I have a question for Bill.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just circling back to that prior use case, to clarify, did you upload email addresses and then it was able to tell you generally what those people did?
Well, it didn't get all the way. It just told I was getting primary use case for whatever that, if there's a corporate email, I'm getting primary use case of what the company is doing specifically. It's not finding if you have W. Smith at Goldman Sachs and saying, oh yeah, Bill, we know that he does X. It's not that.
Oh, okay. Because we sell to very, very, very large multinational companies. and I have lots and lots of email addresses, very few job titles, and no idea what department they're from.
Yeah, I started with this by going through LinkedIn and saying, and I did it 5 times, and it just, and then I just said, I'm going to just try chat and see if chat can come up with something. And the main thing, what we want to do is get categories. You know, it wasn't necessarily identify the person per se, although certainly we'll be doing that later for some of the high-end clients or targets.
Yeah, my problem is I need to figure out all the different departments that these 3,000 email addresses work for.
I think that may be hard, at least from what I saw, from what I got.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, Christy, I know there's services out there where you can upload that and it'll try to match and find them. You know, one
yeah,
of
that's true. I should probably just do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there are a couple that I've played around with. They're super expensive, but you know, I'll be happy to send you a list if you want.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, it's become a huge problem.
Yeah, I have a similar problem where we have a client who has 3,800 contacts or customers, and some of them we don't have contacts for, and some of the contacts we don't know what company they're with, and most of the contacts we don't have phone numbers or titles or anything. So it's a chocolate mess. But I can tell you, after spending, I don't know, $9,000 on a service to figure it all out, they only had like about a 30% match rate. So wee bit disappointing, but yeah, I can tell you who to avoid. How's that sound?
Okay.
All right.
So,
All right,
John,
guys.
just clarification,
Yes, John.
your 9:30 is Central Time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And is it
But I'll
only
send
for
out.
2 weeks from today, or is it going to be ongoing?
Yeah, no, we'll just do it 2 weeks from today, unless everybody wants to move it to 9:30.
No.
But yeah, Jim, what do you want? You want to move it to 9:30 or you flex?
Oh no, I was waving goodbye. I've got to run. But thank you.
Okay,
Very
yeah.
informative
All right.
and fantastic
All
group.
right. Thanks.
Thanks again.
All right. Well, look, I appreciate y'all. If you have any thoughts, ideas, or any suggestions for future topics, feel free to send them on and we'll work them in. All right.
Okay,
Appreciate
great.
y'all joining.
Weekend.
Have a great weekend. All
Thank
right.
you, John.
Bye-bye.